The Big East Conference will always have a special place in my heart. As a kid growing up in New Jersey, my home school Rutgers competed in the conference and made waves in the conference as I was growing up. I remember going to Rutgers against USF, UConn, and other games like that. It was a BCS automatic qualifier and reigned supreme in the northeast portion of the country. The conference seemed unbreakable throughout the 2000s, or so it seemed. But when conference realignment reared its ugly head, the cracks within the conference were shown as it began to collapse. In this video, I want to go over a brief history of the Big East Conference and what caused the football portion of the conference to collapse. The Big East Conference was founded in 1979 when new NCAA basketball scheduling requirements caused multiple independent Northeast schools talked about starting their own conference. Providence, St. John's, Georgetown, and Syracuse are considered to be the founding members of the conference, with Seton Hall, Connecticut, Holy Cross, Rutgers, and Boston College receiving invites. Rutgers and Holy Cross would decline the invite, and Villanova joined the conference in 1980. In 1982, Pittsburgh joined the conference. Before the Big East Conference, many of these schools participated in the ECAC men's basketball tournament to get a bid to the NCAA tournament. The conference arguably made its first mistake in 1982 when they decided to reject Penn State from joining the conference. The Nittany Lions received 5 yes votes but needed 6 to join. At the time, it was rumored that Syracuse had cast the deciding vote, but that would later be found to be false because they actually voted in Penn State. Georgetown, St. John, and Villanova were the schools who voted against Penn State. Remember, at this point, the Big East was not playing football, but then Big Ten administrator and future Big East commissioner Mike Tranhes warned the conference would rue the day they rejected the Nittany Lions. After a decade of existence, the conference would decide to start playing football, adding Rutgers, Miami, Temple, Virginia Tech, and West Virginia, with Miami being the only school offered full all-sport membership immediately. The first football season came in 1991, with West Virginia becoming full members in 1995. Notre Dame joined the conference that same year as a non-football member, while Virginia Tech would have to wait until 2000 to become a full member. Temple remained a football-only member until 2004 and was voted out of the conference due to poor attendance figures, lack of playing success, and inadequate facilities. From the beginning, the conference was shaky because of its football-basketball dynamic. Non-football members were always worried that the football schools would break away to force their own conference. Realignment hit the Big East for the first time in 2003 when they saw the departure of Miami and Virginia Tech for the ACC. That summer, the remaining Big East football schools decided they wanted to split away, believing their interests were no longer aligned with those of the basketball-playing schools. Kevin O'Malley, a TV executive turned consultant, was brought in to help then-Commissioner Mike Tranhes keep the league together. O'Malley told ESPN they had actually drafted a letter that was going to be sent. As far as we were concerned, the basketball schools were history. What I pointed out was something that is a recurring theme throughout all of this video, which is how much the basketball schools and the football schools needed each other. It took a while, but we put Humpty Dumpty back together again. The league would see the departure of Boston College, but added Louisville, USF, and Cincinnati to make up for the 3 lost schools. Andrea Adelson from ESPN wrote back in 2021, "The growing importance of football from a revenue-generating standpoint, most importantly during television contract negotiations and making sure I had a seat at the table in the old Bowl Championship Series, only widen the chasm between the football and basketball schools. It became much harder for the league to not only figure out its identity, caught between its basketball tradition and the riches of football, but also keep everybody moving forward together." Although the conference would survive this time period, it showed the cracks surrounding the conference. One former Big East athletic director told ESPN, "Over time it got more contentious because the basketball side was always wary of the football side. And as we drove some of those ideas, it was viewed as more of a football play instead of a league play." The cracks in the conference would turn into chasms in December of 2009 when the Big Ten announced it was going to explore expansion over the next year to year and a half. Former Pitt athletic director Steve Peterson said, "The day the Big Ten announced that, I think everybody said, okay, here we go. If you don't know whether you're going to be the one that's going to be selected, the risk is high. So we really tried to come up with some kind of way to cement the Big East together." Understandably, a lot of the schools just didn't want to make that kind of commitment. They said, well, what if we had the chance to go to one of these conferences? At a meeting before the college basketball tournament in 2011, athletic directors were shocked when expansion was not one of the topics on the docket. Dale Gross, the former athletic director at Syracuse, brought up the topic of expansion at the meeting and was later approached about whether the Orange were leaving the conference, which he denied. The Big East tried to form a partnership with several Big 12 schools when it was rumored that Texas and Oklahoma were leaving the conference. Once the Longhorns and Sooners decided to stay, The idea fizzled out, and Big East Commissioner John Marinado sent the Big 12 Commissioner Dan Beebe a bottle of champagne to congratulate him for keeping his league together. If only Marinado knew what was coming. The biggest question for the Big East at the time was their television deal. At the time, the Big East was working with ESPN on a new rights deal that would bump its annual payout from $36 million per year to $155 million per year. All told, the deal would be worth more than $1.3 billion over the life of the contract. As its television partner at the time, ESPN had an exclusive negotiating window to make a deal happen with the Big East. Yet there was a disagreement on whether the Big East should take their media rights deal to the open market. Schools like Georgetown, Pitt, and Rutgers felt like they could get an even better deal than what ESPN was offering. Peterson told ESPN, "We just felt like at the time the deal didn't reflect our value. As you looked at the numbers you just said, if you're going to sign a long-term deal that you feel is undervalued, then you're going to be sorry almost the minute you sign it. We understood we were not in the same position at this point as the Big Ten or the ACC, but we felt we were in a better position than the way the numbers came out. Though the majority of the league schools wanted to take the deal, those with misgiving controlled the conversation and became the loudest voices in the room. Things came to a head in May of 2011 with the newly expanded Pac-12, with Colorado and Utah aboard, announced a television package of its own with ESPN and Fox worth a reported $3 billion, subsequently greater than the Big East offer. This forced the Big East brass to reevaluate the offer on the table, and they ultimately decided to walk away. One person with the knowledge of the situation told ESPN, "That deal came out of nowhere and people started to ask if they're willing to pay for the Pac-12, why wouldn't we be able to get more? So now everybody's thinking Comcast is all this money, and we had 1 year to go before the end of our contract, so people said they should go onto the open market." One former Big East official said ESPN asked for a counteroffer, but the league never sent one. Multiple athletic directors were shocked when they walked away from the deal. Then Louisville athletic director Tom Jurich spoke on the situation, saying, "I've always been the one in the hand is better than two in the bush, and that would have kept us very stable. But I was a newcomer talking. We were very happy where we were, and maybe those schools weren't happy. Maybe they had bigger aspirations. I don't know." Officials from the schools that eventually left deny they were in negotiations with other conferences at the time the TV deal was nixed. But there are some former Big East officials who remain dubious. Some even claim their deal was sabotaged by some schools who were planning to leave. One former official said, "There was a sincere and genuine effort put towards trying to figure out a way to shore ourselves up and present more value to the market to capitalize on our deal. This theory was that we deliberately tried to stop the TV deal from happening because we were all at the finish line with other conferences, is bullshit." Multiple sources confirmed that Pitt and Rutgers tried early in the process to get league members to agree to a grant of rights, in which schools relinquished the control of their TV rights to the conference. But there was no consensus. With no grant of rights, no expansion plan, and no television deal, there was simply nothing to hold the league together. Things were already shaky in the conference, but they also had a brand new commissioner with Marinado, instead of Trangies. The conference tried to spin things in a positive way, saying big things were coming at their media day in 2011, but according to Gross, things were eventually crumbling and falling apart. So much so that he received a phone call from the ACC. He said Syracuse would be interested in joining without any hesitation. The same thing was going on at Pitt, but neither school knew they'd be joining the conference at the same time. Despite the uncertainty and fragility of the Big East, multiple people described feeling blindsided that Syracuse and Pitt, two of the league's most identifiable members, including one founding member, would leave. One person said it shook the conference to its core. One former Big East official told ESPN, "Syracuse and the Big East were synonymous with one another for the entire history of the conference. When they left, there was no recovery." According to Peterson, Pitt was upfront about looking into leaving. According to Jurich, things began to avalanche as every school began to look for themselves. Things got even worse when TCU, who had agreed to join the Big East in November 2010 to boost their profile in the BCS conference, pulled out of their commitment to join the Big 12 by mid-October. The Big East also pushed hard to land Boise State as a football-only member, while Louisville and West Virginia fought for the last spot in the Big 12. Former West Virginia athletic director Oliver Luck told ESPN, "There are no rules in this game of realignment, right? There wasn't any arbiter. You couldn't go to the NCAA or federal government. It was a game we likened to musical chairs. You don't want to be the one standing when the music stops." Luck still remembers the day that Pitt and Syracuse announced they were leaving, making a meeting with Marinado as quickly as possible. The two met in the suite inside Maryland's football stadium and began discussions on how the football side of the conference was going to survive. Neither said what appeared obvious in hindsight. Even if they wanted to, they never had the chance. Marinado got a phone call 5 minutes into their meeting. Luck watched as Marinado turned ashen and pale, then fell to the ground. Luck told ESPN, "I remember saying to myself, oh my god, the conference is falling apart. The commissioner just fainted in front of me, and I don't know what to do." The phone call concerned the Big East founder David Gavitt, who had just passed away as his beloved league fell apart. Luck raced to the medical personnel, who helped Marinado regain consciousness. But there's a reason 10 years later that Luck remembers that moment so clearly. That day serves as a point of demarcation where nothing would ever be the same for the Big East or its league members. 40 days after Luck met with Marinado, West Virginia announced it was moving to the Big 12, beating out Louisville in a high-stakes race that drew in high-powered politicians and pitted two Big East members against each other for the final open spot. As Big East officials worked on creating a western flank with Boise State and San Diego State, remaining schools Louisville, Cincinnati, UConn, and South Florida and Rutgers kept making entreaties to other conferences to find an escape route. The Big East also had conversations with Air Force, Navy, and Army, but ultimately opted for football-only partnership with Boise State and San Diego State. In addition, UCF, Houston, and SMU would join as full-time members. The move gave the Big East the largest footprint in the country. But because the conference looked so different, no one knew whether it would retain the BCS status or what the future television deal would be worth. Skepticism remained that bringing in Boise State and San Diego State from the other side of the country would actually keep the Big East together. The basketball schools were not thrilled either. When a 4-team college football playoff was announced, it basically meant the death of the conference known as the Big East. It meant the conference would no longer have an automatic bid to the BCS Bowl, which took away the huge advantage the conference had over the Mountain West. Marinado resigned in May of 2012 with the league in turmoil. As one friend of his said, he was just a guy that was a student manager for the basketball team for David Gavitt at Providence College and Mike Trangi's his friend, and was handed the reins by the two of them, and the conference collapsed. That's the weight he carried with him. Whether he could have done anything to keep the league together is a question up for debate, considering all the outside factors that were beyond his control. Mike Orasco was hired as commissioner in August with an eye towards maximizing television rights. But first, Notre Dame announced it would be taking all of its Big East affiliated sports to the ACC while remaining an independent in football. When Rutgers with the Big Ten and Louisville to the ACC announced their own departures over a 1-week span in November of 2012, the Big East as a football-playing conference fell apart. In mid-December of 2012, the 7 Big East basketball-playing schools announced a split from the football-playing schools. A few weeks later, Boise State struck a deal to return to the Mountain West. San Diego State followed shortly after that. The Broncos were given the green light to sell their home games separately from the conference television package, allowing them to earn more money than any other member of the conference, about $1.8 million more in annual revenue. The conference I grew up watching was dead. I was heartbroken. I grew up going to Rutgers games when they were a part of the Big East. I considered myself a Wisconsin and Rutgers fan because of my family and where I grew up. 2012 also marked the New Jersey Nets moving to Brooklyn. Although it wasn't a major move, the 2012 year as a New Jersey sports fan was filled with heartbreak. The rebranded American Athletic Conference has done well since its creation, but it's not the same. The Big East had created crazy memories for me like the Pandemonium in Piscataway, USF rising up to number 2 in the AP poll, and West Virginia's special teams. Ultimately, the Big East seemed doomed going back to the 1980s when they voted against adding Penn State. The uneasy relationship between the football and non-football member schools, and the change of leadership at the wrong time. It's unfortunate because had things been different, we could have seen a conference including the schools like Syracuse, Rutgers, Boston College, UConn, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, Louisville, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Penn State, if not more schools. With Penn State in the fold, Notre Dame might have joined the Big East in the 80s as well, as its fan base has always been more Eastern-oriented than around its Midwestern-based campus. With most of the major market on the Eastern Seaboard, the television deal could have been massive as well. Due to the nostalgia, I miss the Big East Conference, but what do you think? Do you wish the Big East had survived college football's realignment? And what do you think caused the demise of the conference? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for daily college football content. And check out one of my other videos YouTube thinks you will love right here. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, remember to embrace the grind.